committee. So glad to be here.
Thanks, everyone. And now we have Georgana and Nate who will be leading the session. So I guess we can start with you, Georgana.
Okay, Georgana Webster here. I'm the Montana Department of Ag Organic Program Manager. And so what we're going to do this afternoon is have just a short bit of introduction and kind of framework. And then I'm going to leave it open for questions and answers. You know, it sounds like two people just kind of want to get caught up and have an idea where certification is at this point and what it entails. And so I'll just start off. This is just a friendly conversation, just to give you a little framework and background. In 1990, OFPA, the Department of Ag back at the USDA authorized a national organic program. And that OFPA rule was written, and it was to be administered by the USDA AMS. And it was a program to be based on federal regulations. So at that time, the organic community wanted some sort of framework and regulations, and it fell under that general intent of rule that was written. And it was to define standards for organic farming practices and to have a list of national substances that would be acceptable for organic production. So that was the purpose in 1990. And then in the 2000 era, we got the USDA National Organic Program, and that became an official program under the USDA AMS. And along with that came the regulations that we find in 7 CFR 250. And that's where everything still centers, is on those regulations and their interpretation. And some of them have aged a little bit. And so every year we do have an opportunity to clarify, revise, add, subtract to that rule. It's very hard to do and very time consuming to do that. And we also evaluate materials that are on that list that are on a cyclical nature to see if they are still acceptable or not. And in brief, the reason a material would be still acceptable would be because maybe it's not possible to get that in an organic form, like beet juice color. That's something really odd to tell you, but that would be one of them. And this goes for crops, livestock handling, and wildcrafts for those materials. So that's kind of the USDA rule. It's a nice book, and I've got it here. I've got one, and you can find all those regulations, and there's not that many of them. Interpretation sometimes can be gray, and sometimes it's really clearly black and white. And that's what each certifier who's accredited under the USDA National Organic Program, that's where we're held responsible. So now I'll kind of go off here into the certifier world, or certification. So in the United States, there's approximately 75 certifiers. They can be housed within a Department of Agriculture or as a private business entity. Some of those certifiers also do international work. And so we've got like 3 or 4 big known ones, QAI, OTCO, and they do work worldwide. And we also, in other countries, there are certifiers in Canada. There's a couple in Canada, there's some in Europe. They're all over the world. And so largely, we'll just focus right now on the US. If you become certified, you'd be certified to the USDA NOP equivalency, because that's our rules, and that's what you'd be, that's what standard you would be accounted for, have to be accounted for under that. So Montana chose to have a Department of Ag program. And that took a number of years to start that up, have inspections, write the rules as in under state government. And a private certifier would have policies, you know, largely the same. We don't operate any different, you know, same umbrella, same people. And so for Montana, I will say this for the Johnny's rep, you know, there are like 3 or 4 other certifiers that operate in Montana, and only 2 of which really have any substantial accounts or clients. So the state actually has the majority of people in Montana that we certify. Let's see what else we hear. So the regulations, the reason why we have regulations is to set a standard. And so that when a consumer goes into the marketplace, or I look on Johnny's Seeds and I see, you know, a registered material that they've got a label on or something like that, that the seal or those labels actually mean something, that they're actually held to that standard. And it's federal oversight in a sense, so that there's truth in labeling. Same thing what occurs for any imports or exports. So there's truthfulness and integrity going on in regards to that. I can touch a little bit as far as what's going on in a second as far as integrity is concerned. This may be a little bit different. The act, also this act created in those regs, a 15-member board called the National Organic Standards Board, or NOSB, which Nate is a part of. And that's really the democracy system, because that board is responsible to assist, develop standards, recommendations, review substances, and work on changing, altering, revising the final rule in any way. So that's where even anybody can go to that meeting, anybody can petition, have comments, certifiers, private parties. So it's really a very good system. And although it's very slow, because then it goes back into the USDA to result in any changes. So, and the bottom line is the standards assure that a consumer is getting what they paid for, and integrity-wise, that the seal really means something, and that there's consistency. So then I'll go to certification. So that's the whole point. We have this giant framework of structure. We have that OFPA general intent document, and then we have the USDA regulations, and then we have certification, you know, in order to utilize that whole structure. And from any certifier, it consists of filing an application and an organic system plan. And the system plan is based on the rules totally. And then for producers, you would have a land application of some type, a previous land management application if there's a question of who managed it previously, maps, crops, any other types of materials that we need to review. All that paperwork comes into a certifier. They review it, they give it to an inspector. The inspector physically annually goes about to observe things on that farm and verify that the things in the organic system plan are exactly what they're doing. And it's really hard sometimes because new people think that somehow that this is a license for forever. It's always sad to have to say, oh no, I'm sorry, we have to come back every year, you know. Inspections are usually just once a year. And this is true unless there's some other reason that we would do that. And so this is true for crops and handlers, for production handlers. So the role of a certifier is to receive those documents, inspect, review, verify, and then to provide an organic certificate that lists exactly what that operation is producing. And by chance, if they were exporting to Europe or to Canada or to Japan, Korea, then that would have to be, in the case of a handler, to Korea, that would have to be on that certificate to meet that standard. So it's a process-based type of way to be certified. It involves trust and integrity because we are there only once a year. And it's through observations and records that things are verified. And the common refrain from people is that, oh my gosh, there's too much paperwork. And really and truly, most businesses, most farming operations, they will already need to keep these type of records if they're a good business. And so that kind of sums it up. Do you guys have any questions just about the USDA National Organic Program, certification, the rules? And I can go off after I have that opening. I'll just tell you briefly kind of what's new.
After you tell us what's new, I would like you to address the small producer exemption if there is one for.
Oh, okay.
But I want to, I want to hear what you have to say before I go after something I could possibly find in a book somewhere.
Okay, and I'll address that first. That is in the rule, and that's the $5,000 exemption. And so a lot of times a producer will come to us and want to be certified. And then when they talk about cost and stuff, which we'll tell them roughly about $1,000 for the whole thing on a small producer or less, we often ask them, well, what's the stage or the size of your operation? Because for the first year or two, as you start up that business, you can use the $5,000 exemption, which is found in the rule. And so that is definitely a component of communication to people. And then also when we get somebody like at a farmer's market, we use that as an education point to let them know that, hey, you have this exemption, but we can ask to see your records to prove it, because that's what the regulations say. So we use that as an education. It's meant to be a starter point. So people get involved in organics based on philosophy, all the way across to wanting to make millions of dollars. It's a very broad spectrum of people that do this.
I have a question about that, actually, especially being in Missoula, where there are numerous small farms around the area who aren't certified organic, in part because of the way the farmers market developed here and what had a solid clientele. But I still see farmers I know who are not organic say we're organic. What is the threshold? Besides the 5,000, I know they do over $5,000. So
them going to jail. That's the threshold.
So, we used to go into farmers markets. The department did more so, but we did in Washington State, and we would go as an educational arm and say, hey, you can advertise like this, but you need to realize that we will check records, blah, blah, blah. So you kind of feel where people are at with that. And then because we can pick up bad actors that way, usually in Montana, there hasn't been that much of a focus on that. And we did have some people, or one of our other staff, that did more farmers market work. And so they focused on that. And then I can also say the NOP actually kind of told us, only worry about what you need to worry about. So then the vehicle for that is filing a complaint. And you wouldn't want to filing a complaint would be something that was obviously erroneous or wrong. Like you live next door to somebody and you watched them spray the daylights out of everything, and then they're selling an organic, that type of complaint. As far as, the minor people, just be educating, saying, well, how do you know you're organic? Because it's been misconstrued multiple times, the definitions, the whole, that's all got watered down somewhat, which is sad.
what are the stats on actually going further than a complaint?
Oh, the NOP has wonderful visual charts of the cases that they get every year. Nate, can you remember any of those numbers on those charts?
As far as number of cases?
Yeah, I mean, they're in the hundreds.
Yeah. Well, I think something like $48 million in fines was collected.
Okay, there you go.
And so it would be hundreds, probably it would definitely be several thousand complaints investigated. Oftentimes as I've done several investigations this year, and it's really interesting how complaints come to exist. Because I'll see an operation as an inspector and kind of know where the fraud it lies. It's a little trickier to submit a complaint as an inspector rather than just submit your report, which you might not be asked the right questions as an inspector for that operation. But one thing I think that is really cool is that there's a lot of money being invested right now into the NOP enforcement division. And so through strengthening organic enforcement, which recently has cleared a lot of the rulemaking, not quite to the finish line, but a lot of the rulemaking, there's now going to be a lot of those loopholes closed, not the $5,000 exemption, but like brokers. It used to be that you could buy and sell organic and not yourself be licensed if you didn't take physical control of it. That is going to be closed. So anyone who buys or sells organic is going to need to be certified, which is both exciting and scary for those in certification, because there's going to be tens of thousands of more clients needing a home. One thing I wanted to say about the $5,000 exemption is also that you're not allowed to use the organic seal under this, and you can't call it certified organic. You just can call it organic. And so I think a neat evolution has been through Georgana's education work with the vegetable growers, at least in the Bozeman area. Every single one is certified organic that I can think of. And it started with one person doing it, but eventually enough consumers asking, is it certified, that it then kind of snowballed to where I don't think you see a vegetable producer in Bozeman who's not carrying that certification at this point. So I think the education component really is just that. It's an important way to help people understand who aren't trying to skirt the rules necessarily.
Good to know. Thank you.
So Nate just alluded to that update, which I've been talking about that update for 2 years now, I swear. Because that's what I said, process takes time.
Yep.
And that is the tightening of the rule and to include those brokers. It's also because of the grain fraud that occurred in the Ukraine. It's also going to result in the Border Patrol Services, and it's BPHS, I think, checking for fraud as organic labeled product comes into the country, and we just didn't have a very clear system to inspect what was coming into the country. And now organics is going to be put into that electronic system that they have. And so there'll be document flow that will back up a certified buy for product coming in. So that's one of the big things. So there's some big good issues that are happening, and the fact that the NOP has hired more technical people to do more investigative work. They're going to be focusing just one aspect, just on training for certifiers, for inspectors. You know, your quality is only as good as the foundation of people with boots on the ground. So that's going to be part of those requirements that are going to be, I don't know how they'll flesh them out in the rule. And a whole bunch of documents have just been submitted pre-evaluation, pre-commentary to rulemaking. And and I'll let Nate comment after this. It seems that the pattern of rulemaking is never to get too specific. And so there's good in that and there's bad. Without too specific, it allows some areas that are in that gray that shouldn't be. But on the other hand, because interpretation can be so different for what constitutes training, do you really want to put a number on it? So it'll be interesting what the outcome is on that. As far as the import situation, that's been pretty clear of what they're going to do with that. Nate, do you want to address a comment on those two topics?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot, I mean, like you're saying, there's a lot of work going into this strengthening organic enforcement. And I think it's a real testament to, there are very few USDA marketing programs that really have a lot of teeth in any way. Anything from, Angus verified beef over to, and I honestly just don't have another good one off the top of my head, but grass-fed, right, which unfortunately since 2015 has been pretty much a voluntary self-regulation, but the same idea applies that organics is one of those very few that folks go to jail for violating, and really large fines are levied, and there's a lot of resources put into that enforcement. And so it's really neat, I think, as part of that organic standards board, but also as just an organic farmer and consumer, that this much energy, that the energy is snowballing behind this enforcement. And the team has, the other cool thing about the NOP is it's pretty apolitical. I think it's always tricky, but very different administrations between Obama and Trump as far as regulation. And they still kept up with incredible work enforcing and maintaining the integrity of the seal. And so that's kind of off our plate from National Organic Standards Board purview right now, just because we submitted that strengthening organic enforcement. But we're now moving on to trying to figure out how to increase and maintain human capital in the organic inspector world. And so there's all these moving parts that are always needing to be improved, and a really interesting and diligent body that's eager for input and contribution from the greater organic community.
We even argue about the words human capital.
Yeah, it does.
It's just hilarious. So certifiers think that some of that found it insulting, and so they'll probably change it to something else. But I mean, these are all good. That's how robust, when Nate says snowball, there are lively discussions, to say the least. So
It looks like Mark has a question.
Yeah.
Do you know if testing is being done on imported products, or are you just checking the document trail as it comes into is the Border Patrol going to just be checking the document trail as it comes in?
So I'm going to back up and ask, and then I'll go to Nate. So the USDA National Organic Program requires every certifier to capture and test 5% of their total clients. So every certifier has to submit samples every year to a third-party lab that's ISO accredited to be evaluated for a panel of a couple hundred analytes. Mind you, they're not necessarily all the one analytes that we'd like to have checked, but we'd have that. So that's in the US. Prior to this rule, there were things that were creeping into the US. I think it was green beans from South America and bananas, that some of those products, like the bananas, would have been gassed. And so then really and truly, what's an organic banana? And the bean thing was something that only a few people know. And so I don't believe there was any prior testing unless there was some red flag coming in. And Nate, you want to go ahead and correct me on that?
No, that's on point. It's really a fascinating point of this strengthening organic enforcement, because they're actively writing those rules now. What they did for fraud, a lot of fraud to date on the international import side, was that they used GMO testing to ultimately just further evidence against the claim that something's organic. So they had that as a tool, but there's a growing chorus of stakeholders who are requesting that, like Georgana said, a certain panel of pesticides, herbicides, parasiticides be tested for, and especially ones that are kind of known problematic inputs in different regions. And so if you have get soybeans from India, there's going to be a panel of things that they use on conventional soybeans in India that may indicate more clearly if something is coming in fraudulently. So as of now, that's in the works of how that'll actually play out. But CFPB does have the resources and the infrastructure to do it. It'll just have to be a request from the National Organic Program.
CFPD,
Customs border. Wait, customs. Oh shoot!
I know, I can't remember it either.
Border enforcement. I thought there was an F in there. What does the F stand for?
Oh, I don't know.
It looks like Joanna has a question. I'll do a quick search.
Yeah, I was just typing it. Yeah, I am curious about how the strengthening the organic standards that went into effect in August of this year will impact industry partners like seed companies for supplying our records to our growers. I've noticed that since August, I'm getting a lot more requests from my growers asking about more specific information. I used to work for a certifier, so I already know most of the points that people want, but I'm very curious about what I can do to support my growers and have that improve the packet that I'm already handing over to them for their inspections.
What questions are you being asked?
Excuse me, I have a call coming and I'm just gonna take it to voicemail. Thank you.
What questions specifically are you being, or what?
Yeah, specifically, growers are beginning to ask me for lot number information associated with their pelleted seed and the pelleted seed materials. We have all the information, so we're giving it to them. But I'm also beginning to get, those are totally normal, but I'm beginning to get a lot of questions for country of origin as well, which we have. And so it's a matter of, is that because of the standard that's changed? If that's necessary, then I need to change my reporting system to streamline my reports to include that.
I don't think so. I think that's in relation to certifiers tightening up the seed search aspect. And that's something, that's again, one of when I said the rule sometimes is too general, and they have to be able to prove that they can't find it anywhere in the quantity, quality, or variety. So there's probably certifiers are really buckling down on that aspect. And so that's why you have to, that's what I would say. Nate, do you have any comments?
No, I would assume it is overeager producers wanting to gather. I've not heard anything about country of origin in particular to seeds. But I have heard of certifiers coming across fraud from a particular region or country that then they will want to internally be monitoring more closely. And so they'll be asked, do you import any goods? And though really all the producer would have to say is, no, I buy them from Johnny's. Johnny's certifier would then have to deal with that importation component, but usually it stops certificate to certificate. So I don't think so. I think, ultimately for the inspector, the more information you give us on behalf of the producers, the easier our job is. But on the whole, no, just ingredient information in the pellets and then seed information as far as organic.
Great, that's really wonderful to hear. Thank you.
Which certifier did you work with?
WSDA, actually.
Oh, cool. All right.
I was remembering your first name. That's who I used to work for.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was there for about 3.5 years. When were you there?
2005 to 2012.
Oh, I started a year after you left. So
yeah. So you're friends with Catherine Withy?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Keep in touch. I'm glad she's still in the industry.
Yeah, it's fun. So I can make a comment with that. So certifiers, we try to talk to each other. We don't all want to disagree. And so if we have friendships, just like I do with my old person I used to work with at WSDA, who now works for QAI, every once in a while, I will call her up and go, hey, what do you think about this? And so that kind of stimulation is really important to us, that we're not in some vacuum, trying to interpret rule, but we do actually seek outside opinion. So what other people are doing.
Yeah. Great.
Anything else from anybody? I know we have somebody, Eric is on here. I don't remember you. Did you have a question about organic certification? We're just kind of doing an open conversation.
Well, thanks for addressing me directly, but no, it's just really nice to get the general information.
This is Mark. I like it that you are continuing the the ethos of continuing to cooperate across borders and boundaries, because trying to, stuff complex biology into a rule book is really tough. And
Yeah.
it's always escaping your boundaries, and you're always finding new things that challenge your boundaries. And there's a constant, of course, there's always the constant enforcement game being played by people who want to bend or break the rules for obvious reasons. So the fact that, people in Montana can pick up the phone and talk to someone in Washington State or Washington, DC or Florida is a real benefit all the way around.
Yeah, that's a good point. So somebody just asked about inspections for next year, so I can give you guys just kind of a brief synopsis of what happened. This last year when COVID hit, the USDA, in all their wisdom, and I really sincerely mean that, said, you guys figure it out. We're not going to tell you how to do this. Just make sure you fulfill the rule. And so that's what all the certifiers did. They went out and figured out, how are we going to keep our people safe, and how are we going to keep the people that we inspect safe? So almost all of us had different type of inspections, whether they were completely virtual or half and half. We all went out and inspected this year because the NOP requires us to be on site every year and look at land and look at crops. And if we had a new producer, there is no way that we could not be on their property. So any new producers this last year, we were on the ground. And actually, for all of our producers, we were on the ground. I know there was a component of inspections that were completely virtual, but for the Department of Ag, the majority were not. They were half and half, meaning we would talk to you and go through your records either online, virtually, and on the phone. And then we'd follow that with the inspection on the ground component of checking crops. As fall came through, I made the determination, and actually big companies were making the determination for me, that they really did not want an inspector into a handling facility, whether it be coffee or flour. They did not want to risk their crew getting sick from somebody coming in. And so all the handler inspections have been conducted virtually, with the exception of one who was new, and I had to be feet on the ground for them. And actually that day I did combine some other on-site ones, but for the most part, those were all virtual. And I was just talking to Jamie, at this point for 2021, I see this being much the same. We'll probably go into springtime and we will have that first component of records and organic system plan updates. That's going to be a virtual inspection, but we will still be on the ground for the other portion of that inspection. And because we have to check if you had any land changes, crops, bins. It's very difficult to go FaceTime and look at cattle. I think I actually did that with somebody. I can't remember who, but I also was on the ground. So all those will probably stay the same for 2021. Maybe in the fall, we'll be able to get half on the ground again with the handlers. But at this point, especially in Montana, the cases have ticked up. And this is just about common sense at this point. And it really goes back to those clients. They have opinions also of how they want people at their facilities and on their farms and ranches. So we made the decision to keep everybody safe and to pivot to a different way of doing things. It will be this coming year. So certifiers are audited by the NOP. This year, Montana has their midterm audit. So I'm sure they're going to be looking for the SOPs that we wrote up, and did we follow them, how we completed what we said we were going to do in relation to inspections. So I'm sure they'll take a look at that. So Nate, do you have any comments?
No, I think it's pretty comprehensive. I would predict that, yeah, we're going to be deep into 2021, likely before anything would change from a policy standpoint from the NOP. And so I think all certifiers are going to be making the judgment call about how to best take care of their clients. I think from the paperwork side, as an inspector, I've found that there's just not a whole lot different from sitting at a table, handing documents back and forth and emailing documents back and forth, and sharing a screen. Oftentimes I feel like I can look at records better if they're scanned in and kind of review them in a screen share scenario. So from that point of view, it does I don't think there's a big deficit to the inspection process. I think the more we can still stay out in the field, the better. But yeah, I think personally, I never thought we would go through the summer with a pandemic, but here we are in December thinking 2021 is the same. So I would hate to guess at where we'll be, but I think it's working all in all for certifiers maintaining integrity.
Yeah, I would say that too, because the inspections that I've done, I've found more detail. It gives you a better look at records, actually. I've found more things that have been, I won't say in error, but that needed updated because you're looking at things, you're able to focus a little bit better. So
agreed. Yep.
Yeah. So audit wise, the same thing. I don't see any difference. Somebody can take me, there is nobody, even the very unskilled 65, 70-year-old handler operators have been fine to take me with their phone with FaceTime. And I just go, hey, I've never done this either. Let's just go do it. And it works out. Everybody's really, we haven't have anybody that's been unhappy. I can say that. That's the good news. So
I think to answer the question summary that was posted in the chat box, hybrids for sure in 2021. Without a doubt.
Yep. And hybrid is the nomenclature for doing it partially on the ground and partially virtual. So we've got all these new words.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else you guys would like to bring up? Pretty much an open book here.
Let's, can we go back to pricing a little bit? You said the cost can run to $1,000. Is that like a fixed?
No. So every certifier has an application fee. So that's one fee. And that is usually, and most all certifiers, it is in a range. So the more over time, I shouldn't say not the first year, but the more income you have organically, the more you're going to pay. That's kind of the bottom line. But there are groupings or ranges that you would make be accounted for, like under 20,000 or 40 to 60, 60 to 80, 80 to 120, I think ours is, and then after that. So that's the application. And then you have to pay for the inspection, which this year the bonus for people were that they're not paying fuel or hotels or anything like that. They're just paying straight for inspection. So the inspection's a cost, and an average inspection is roughly around $450, depending on how many hours is spent somewhere. I'm just going to talk about producers right now, usually. And it also depends on how well prepared that person is to demonstrate to us or hand us the records we need to look at. If you have to go out in the barn and dig through 5 boxes and take 20 minutes, well, you got an inspector that's sitting there that it's ticking off the time, which is money. So those are the two components. And then the third one that occurs after the second year is a sales assessment. And those also vary by certifier. So in Montana, and again, almost every certifier is the same in those regards. There are certifiers that have the inspection embedded in the application. And that's kind of a good thing and a bad thing, because maybe the little guys would be paying a little bit more, and the big guys paying a little less if we think of the time spent. But on the other hand, it's pretty been statistically proven that the little guys take more time And the big guys don't because they're prepared. So does that answer that? So in that range, and then you have the grant system, the cost share program that the Farm Bill provided the last 8 years. And that grant system did give 75% back, or $750 max, of any cost that procured through your inspection and your fees. So your risk factor is really low, or your money output really low in that regard, depending on how big your operation is. This year it's been reduced, but that was, and so I just got a question, how the being implemented in 2021. Yeah, I don't know. We don't know yet. So the USDA decided they did not want to manage cost share anymore under the National Organic Program. They wanted to get it on the ground so people could access it. So they gave it to FSA, and FSA has had a little bit of a problem. Excuse me. Which resulted in them having to reduce the amount or percent. And that has created a big furor because it was promised through the Farm Bill. So 2021, it'll be interesting. So what happened in Montana, we used to get $180,000 to distribute. And this year we've got half of that. We only have 90. I mean, that's how significant the drop was. And this has gone, it's being complained through the senators, everywhere through government, the complaint against FSA to what happened, how are you going to fix this back to what it was allocated for. So I don't know what they're going to say in 2021, and we will not know until probably March. Well, I say that. Usually I sign those contracts in March, but in this case, in August, that's when FSA said, oh, I'm so sorry, in August, middle of August, you're not going to be able, we're not going to give you that much money to distribute. So remains to be seen. Don't know.
Contact Senator Tester, who's on appropriations, and it's my understanding that FSA did ask for $9 million to make up for the difference of this year and then to cover next year. However, that $9 million was not sufficient to fund. So I believe it was, sorry, I don't want to misspeak, but one of the organizations that we belong to is requesting $12 million to make sure that the shortfall from this year that was in part due to growth in the program is covered, and then the same thing for next year.
And it wasn't necessarily due to growth. So,
No, not entirely, but not entirely.
Yeah. And then the other question was, are certifying providing any other sort of relief due to the pandemic? No, it's in the state of, I can only speak for Montana, there's been multiple COVID, and you can probably talk about that too, multiple COVID opportunities to apply for grants. So Montana had a very healthy response to that from utilizing federal funds and grants, and distributed lots of money to producers and handlers who conventionally also. Jamie, do you want to talk about that?
I am not an expert on it, but CFAP 2 was initiated this fall, and that was more friendly to organic farmers. We do have a video up on our YouTube site. And then another good person to talk to would be Jeff Shazinski with NCAT. And he is quite knowledgeable on that. If you need contact information, please let me know.
Yeah. And I think, and if you look on the Montana Department of Ag website, it had listed a lot of those grants that were available to people due to that. There was some specialty ones to meat processing facilities. That was a huge
through the state
opportunity, really, of something that had been ongoing and not addressed. So any comments, Nate?
Nope. I think that I'm always interested to think about cost of certification. just because I think that in a way we as an industry have somewhat undervalued the respective role of inspectors and the cost that it takes to maintain integrity. And so I look at, if it's $1,500 to $2,500 for a certification, kind of what a deal that is to be able to access wheat prices that are triple what conventional wheat is running at. But I think that there's been, we would look more towards the state administered COVID relief funds in 2021. I would imagine there's going to be some more relief funding coming. And there's not really, at this point, certifiers are still doing all of the same work in reviewing files, sending inspectors, and so all of that cost has stayed pretty much the same. And I would say I haven't met a rich certifier yet, so there's not a lot of profit wiggle room. Most of them are nonprofits, and so there's, I think, not a lot of relief directly coming from certifiers ever, just because there's not a lot there. But I think everyone should be encouraging, like Jamie said, the respective representatives and senators to free up that cost share money.
Well, I just wanted to say we benefited from the meat processing program here at the ranch, and we're delighted. We weren't selected in the first round of grants that were awarded, but as we were trying to figure out what we were going to do, the second round came up, and we did really well there. The only difference, I guess, for us was that the cost of transportation for the equipment that came to us went up $1,000. Canadian truckers seem to want more money to drive in November than they do in August.
I would think that'd be their peak thrive time.
Yeah. Well, it turns out I've got friends in the truck brokering business, and there are just a ton of trucks here from Eastern Canada that are looking for ways to get home.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that's kind of been an interesting development there. And I don't know what they're bringing other than the one truck that brought us the compost turner. So we were really happy to see him for that. And I guess we're taking a look at the CFAP too. I don't know whether we'll do that or not, but up until that grant, the only government money that we ever used was what we were awarded, I guess, for the inspections, and we enjoyed that quite a bit and have for a long time. So we didn't feel too picked on. It wasn't enough to make us decide to quit, because it had gone down. So I got all this money invested in signage, so we're going to stick with the organic program at least until the color comes out.
Nate brought up another good thing that I could see changing in the future as we start to value the inspectors, because inspectors are kind of like this scruffy crew that don't make a lot of money, and they do it because they love it. And I say scruffy, I know you're, yeah, but because they're running around all over the country trying to do a good job, and they're not acknowledged for their professionalism. Mind you, not that every inspector is perfect by any stretch. But as we see the NOP work on those standards to improve the quality of inspectors, to make sure that we have quality inspectors, I could see inspection fees going up, because they are not logical at this point, nor do they truly. Most people, myself included, we do not charge you enough, nor do we always charge you for all the time that we take, as spent. So, and I say that not on site. We probably really charge you for what we were there on site. But if it takes us 2.5 hours to write a report, and we may have maybe we feel it's kind of like, oh, well, we were a little slow putting that down or whatever, we probably only put down 2 hours. We don't necessarily always exactly charge you probably enough. So, nor does the occupation. In order to get respect for the occupation, one of the other changes that has been broached is to not call inspectors inspectors anymore, but to call them auditors, which is going to scare everybody to death. They have a really terrible time with the word auditor, but it does bring up a little bit the professionalism of that occupation to a different standard at that point. So anyway.
I would just add to that, when we look at, and this is more to the grain side of things, I would say, but when you look at how much money American farmers lost from fraudulent imports, I think it's much more than an extra $500 in certification fees. When you're dropping from $14 corn to $8 corn, that is many hundreds of thousands of dollars a farm will not realize. And so I think from my vantage point as both a producer as well as an inspector, I think there's it's a really good investment to beef up inspections to keep that market full of integrity and keep the right players in the market in order to justify that extra inspection fee. Not that anything's changing yet, but
No.
I think it is something, a conversation.
Yeah, because it's interesting to me, if the average inspection is $1,100, $1,200, that's kind of a big average, okay? And you were getting $750 back through cost share. I don't understand why $500 a year is a big deal, because you pay anybody who has a new pickup truck, you're paying, a couple hundred for your license probably, so yeah. I guess it depends how you look at it.
It looks like Mark has a question.
Well, it's less a question than a comment. I think that oftentimes people who do this kind of work are not coming at it from a marketing standpoint, and they're shy about that. And that, I think that some people can get over that and take more pride in their provision of a service to society, not just to farmers and farming in general. And marketing that price differential is extremely important. That's what's driving the growth and new producers. So the role of the inspector, auditor, whatever you want to call them, is crucial. You can't not have it.
Correct.
It has to be done well, or you lose that price advantage and consumer confidence. So I don't, I think that many of the people in agriculture or in organics are way too modest.
Good perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think the quality of the inspectors has gone up quite a lot too. I haven't had an unpleasant experience with an inspector in the last 20 years. In the early years, we had some people that were pretty far out there, and I'm I'm glad they're not coming back.
Well, Nate and I are personally glad you said that.
We are.
And to the rest of the audience, both Nate and I have inspected Wes's place, so that's why we can say that. So, yeah, it's interesting.
That's why I went back to 20 years. I wanted to make sure that
Yeah, you covered us.
because you might come back.
I think the other point of reference I use in this discussion is food safety auditing, which really is, I think, clearly articulated as a public health service as opposed to a service to the company. But food safety auditors, I would say, are minimum about $1,500 a day, and they're there for 3 or 4 days. So if you're going to be SQF audited or have another food safety claim, organics is a song compared to food safety audits.
Yes.
And so I think that's just a point of reference. It's more on the handling side than the farmer side. But it's, when I look at kind of the expense that goes into food safety, I think if we were looking at it in a similar way of the value of not having your customers get sick, or the value of having your customers still believe in your seal, is quite a bit more than you'll either pay for either audits.
I agree.
Super. All right.
Any other questions?
Well, I have one that's completely off topic. But I was wondering, how do we get items entered in the auction for the conference this year?
We are going to postpone the auction for multiple reasons. Number one, the person who was going to retake on organizing it had some family health issues. And so it is at a standstill, and we'll be looking at doing that after the first of the year.
Okay. Very good. Keep me in mind. I have money invested in what I was going to send, and would really like to see it happen. I think we can have some fun.
Oh, okay. Is it perishable, or we need a certain date?
No,
Oh, okay. All right.
no,
Okay.
not at this point, but I couldn't see us having an auction without a cooler of some sort.
Yes, that is true.
Right.
True. Well, and I think just this is new for all of us, and there's a lot of balls in the air, let's put it that way. And that was just one thing that fell between the cracks. And I think we need to work closely with OAEC as well to make sure that it's all together.
Okay. They're easy though.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Thanks. I think you guys did a great job today. And this is not new stuff to me, but getting connected to Zoom calls when I want is a little bit of a new thing. And so this was kind of a practice session, and it was enjoyable to sit through. So good job, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
It's working surprisingly well. Yeah.
Mhm.
And to have the recordings too for folks who want to go back.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. Well, thanks.